We are continuing to follow that horrific tragedy in Tiffin. 4 people, including 2 children, shot and killed in what police are calling a murder-suicide. Officers responded to a home on Huss Street about 6:30 last night for reports of gunshots and screaming.
Police say the killings happened while the mother of the children was removing belongings from the home following domestic issues. 13 Action News reporter Alexis Means talking with the former boss of the man who was shot and killed, 29-year-old Dustin Willey. And she joins us live from Tiffin tonight.
Welcome to True Crime Lab Hub, where real crimes unfold and hidden motives are exposed.
It was a Wednesday evening, just after 6 p.m., in the quiet city of Tiffin, Ohio. For one woman, this was not just any night. This was Freedom Night. She had a plan. A difficult, dangerous, but necessary plan. She was finally moving out, taking her 2 young sons with her. She was leaving the man who had brought nothing but pain and fear into their lives. She was done with the domestic issues that had made their house on Huss Street feel like a prison. She had waited for the right moment. Her husband, 42-year-old Ryan Eagon, was supposed to be miles away, working out of town. To help her, she had her first son's father, 29-year-old Dustin Willey. It was a fast, coordinated effort. Every minute counted. Dustin was a steady, helping hand. The 2 boys were already near the car, her 7-year-old son and the tiny, 7-month-old baby boy. The children were their future, and the boxes represented the quick escape to a life without fear. Inside the house, the mother and Dustin were grabbing the last few essential items. They were focused, moving with silent urgency. Everything felt too exposed, too vulnerable. But they were almost there. Just a few more minutes, and they would be gone. Then, they heard it. A sound that shattered the careful silence of the evening. It wasn't the sound of an engine or a door closing. It was the frantic, piercing cry of her 7-year-old son. She and Dustin froze. That cry meant one thing. Ryan Eagon was home. They rushed to the front door and pushed it open. Standing in the driveway, blocking their exit, was the very man they thought was hundreds of miles away. Ryan Eagon, armed and waiting. He had not been working out of town. He had set an ambush.
Behind every headline lies a story of love, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. Subscribe now and step inside the world of true crime.
The sight was sickening. But before the mother or Dustin could even fully process the terror, the air was ripped apart by the sound of gunfire. Eagon had opened fire, chasing Dustin, as he tried to protect the mother and the children. Dustin was hit. But then, in a move of cold-blooded, vicious intent, the gunman turned his focus. Not on the person who had tried to run, but on the most defenseless targets, the 2 babies waiting by the car. The horrifying violence that unfolded next took the lives of 4 people, including a 7-year-old and a 7-month-old infant. It ended with the shooter turning the weapon on himself. It was a tragedy born from a woman's attempt to survive, and a man's deadly need for control. Before we look at the life that was lost and the warning signs that were missed, I have a question for you. Have you ever known someone brave enough to leave an abusive situation? What was their biggest challenge? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if this story is important to you, please take a second to hit the like button. What made Ryan Eagon go from a husband with domestic issues to a deadly killer? And how did he know his family was leaving that night? We are going inside the events of the Tiffin ambush to find out. The tragedy that struck Tiffin was a kind of violence the town had never known. The police chief himself said, "As a community, we are not accustomed to events of this horrific and heartbreaking nature." But behind the quiet street of Huss Street, a powder keg of domestic tension was waiting for a spark. That spark was the mother's final decision to leave. We have to understand the family to understand the motive. The central figures were the mother, her husband Ryan Eagon, and her 2 beautiful boys. The oldest child was a 7-year-old boy. Like many children in a blended family, he was loved by his mother and had a strong bond with his biological father, Dustin Willey. Dustin, at 29 years old, was the man who showed up when his son and the mother needed him most, a fact that would cost him his life. The youngest was a 7-month-old baby boy. He was the son of the mother and Ryan Eagon, an infant who had only just begun his life, and whose innocent presence only added to the horror of what was to come. Then there was the man who would become the killer, Ryan Eagon. At 42 years old, Eagon was the mother's husband. The news reports are clear. Their relationship was plagued by ongoing domestic issues. While we don't know the exact history of the abuse, that one phrase tells us everything we need to know. The issues were serious enough, and the fear was real enough, that the mother felt her only safe option was to end the relationship and physically remove her children from the home. This is a choice no one makes lightly. It is a choice born out of desperation and a need to protect. The situation was tense. The mother was walking a tightrope. She was not just packing boxes, she was planning an escape. Every action, every quiet conversation, every moment she had to herself was focused on getting out safely. This kind of departure takes stealth and strategy. She knew her husband had a temper. She knew the relationship was dangerous. The escape plan was based on one piece of crucial intelligence. Ryan Eagon was believed to be working out of town. This was the window. This was the moment of weakness in Eagon's control, where she felt she could finally breathe and make her move. She reached out to Dustin Willey, the father of her 7-year-old. Dustin didn't hesitate. He agreed to help her move the remaining belongings, ensuring she wouldn't be alone and that the process could be done quickly and efficiently. It's important to understand the emotional weight of this moment. For the mother, this was the start of a new life. She had gathered the courage to leave. She had put a support system in place. She had factored in the one thing that should have ensured her safety, her husband's absence. On Wednesday evening, November 20th, 2025, everything was in place. Dustin Willey arrived at the house on Huss Street. The mother had her 2 sons. The plan was to load up the car and drive away to a new, safe life. The decision to move when the abuser is supposedly gone is the standard advice given to domestic violence survivors. It is the textbook maneuver to ensure safety. But what happens when the abuser knows more than you think? What happens when their need for control outweighs their job, their distance, or any reason they give for being away? The mother and Dustin began gathering the belongings. The boys were kept outside, close to the car. Perhaps this was to keep them from getting underfoot. Perhaps it was a small mercy, a way to keep them slightly removed from the stress and tension of the final, painful act of separation. This plan was organized. It was high risk, but it was sound. The only flaw was that Ryan Eagon's need for power and control had been underestimated. He had returned to Tiffin. He hadn't just returned. He had set a trap. He lay and waited. He watched. He listened. And the moment he heard the signs of his wife leaving him, the signs of his control slipping away forever, he acted. The quiet, suburban street was about to become the scene of a cold-blooded ambush. Do you think the mother's plan to move while her husband was away was smart? Or do you think there was a safer way to handle this final, dangerous step? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. The mother and Dustin were inside, grabbing the last box. The keys were in the ignition of the car. The boys were waiting. They were mere seconds away from freedom when the sound that changed everything rang out. The cry of the 7-year-old boy. The sound that signaled Eagon was not hundreds of miles away, but right outside the door, waiting. The decision to leave an abuser is one of the most dangerous choices a person can make. For the mother, her entire strategy hinged on a calculated risk. That Ryan Eagon was hours away, tied up with work. She assumed the quiet window of a Wednesday evening was their opportunity. The plan was simple, efficient, and, she believed, safe. It was executed with the help of Dustin Willey, a man focused on protecting the children. The hours leading up to 6:25 p.m. were a blur of motion and stress. The mother's priority was the children. She needed them away from the immediate chaos and the potential confrontation should Eagon suddenly reappear. The 7-month-old baby boy and the 7-year-old boy were placed near the car, ready to go. They were the most precious cargo, and their safety was the reason for all the risk. Dustin Willey was critical. As the father of the eldest boy, he had a personal stake in ensuring this escape succeeded. The move was not meant to take long. Just grab the essentials and drive. Speed was their defense. They were inside, moving quickly. The house itself held the weight of the ongoing domestic issues. Every room a reminder of the fear she was trying to leave behind. They had to be quiet, avoiding any sound that might alert a neighbor or, worse, anyone else who might be watching. They were relying on secrecy and the certainty of Eagon's absence. This was their fatal mistake. Ryan Eagon had not just returned to Tiffin. He had done so without alerting his wife. He allowed her to believe the lie of his absence. We don't know exactly when Eagon came back, or how long he had been waiting. Did he follow her movements? Was he tracking her calls? Did he simply have a sickening premonition that tonight was the night she would try to leave him? The details are still being processed by investigators, but the result is clear. Ryan Eagon was lying in ambush. The psychology of an abuser in this moment is terrifying. For him, the attempt to leave was not just the end of a relationship. It was the ultimate act of betrayal and the complete loss of control. In his mind, she was taking his property, his wife, his house, and his children. This perceived loss of control is the most dangerous psychological trigger for domestic violence homicide. The mother had planned for almost every contingency except one. That her husband was right there, watching the clock tick down to her escape. Think about this for a moment. Eagon had to have returned, armed himself, and positioned himself perfectly. He had to be close enough to see the two boys near the car, close enough to watch Dustin Willey helping his wife move out. This was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated, prepared, and deadly ambush. He was waiting for the moment they would finally open the door, fully committed to ending their escape and their lives. Inside the house, the mother and Dustin believed they were minutes away from success. They had the last of the boxes. Hope must have been filling the quiet space between them. They were almost out of the darkness. Then, at 6:25 p.m., the silence was shattered. The sound was not a gun blast, not yet. It was the cry of the 7-year-old boy. A noise of sudden, immediate distress. The mother instantly knew. That cry was the confirmation that her deepest fear had materialized. Her husband, the man she was fleeing, was not only present, but had made contact with her children. The plan, the window of opportunity, the illusion of safety, it was all gone. They ran out, bursting from the doorway, only to see the horrifying scene in the driveway. Ryan Eagon was standing there, the weapon already in his hands. The escape had failed. The ambush had begun. The sight in the driveway was instantly paralyzing. There was Ryan Eagon, the man who was supposed to be miles away, standing between the mother, her children, and the car that held their promised freedom. The moment the mother and Dustin Willey rushed into the open, the ambush was fully sprung. Eagon did not pause. He did not speak. His actions were immediate, violent, and directed at the man who dared to help his wife leave. Witnesses later confirmed the brutal sequence of events. Eagon's first focus was on neutralizing the support system. He began to chase Dustin Willey and immediately fired multiple shots. Dustin Willey, 29 years old, was a protector. In that moment of pure adrenaline and terror, he was trying to defend his son's mother and the children. But Eagon's attack was relentless. Willey was struck by the gunfire, collapsing in the driveway. The man who had shown up to help a family escape danger was now fatally wounded. The noise, the smell of gunpowder, the sudden, shocking reality of the violence, it was an overwhelming assault on the senses. The mother, physically unharmed but trapped in the center of a nightmare, could only watch the terror unfold. But the violence was far from over. Eagon's motive was not just to stop the move, it was to inflict the maximum, lifelong pain possible on the woman who had dared to walk away. After striking Dustin, Ryan Eagon performed the most monstrous act of the entire tragedy. He did not reload and finish the job on the adult, who was still moving. Instead, he turned the gun on the children. This was the point of no return. This act reveals the true nature of Eagon's control. If he couldn't have his family, no one could. This was not just murder. It was an act of possessive, vengeful annihilation aimed directly at his wife's heart. First, he struck the 7-year-old boy, the child who had cried out the alarm, the child of Dustin Willey. That terrified cry, the one that broke the silence, was the last sound the boy ever made. Then, the 7-month-old baby boy, Eagon's own son, an infant who had never even taken his first step, who had his whole life stretching ahead of him. Eagon showed no mercy. He fatally shot his own baby son. Imagine the mother's agony. To have planned so carefully, to have been so close to freedom, only to witness the violent murder of her 2 small sons in rapid succession, by the very man she was trying to escape. The trauma is literally unimaginable. She survived, but she lost everything she was fighting for in a matter of seconds. Having completed his gruesome mission of control and revenge, Eagon still had unfinished business. He fired again at Dustin Willey, ensuring the man who tried to help was dead. Dustin, the father who came to assist in the escape, paid the ultimate price for his loyalty. Then, Ryan Eagon completed the murder-suicide. He turned the gun on himself and took his own life. The sound of the final gunshot echoed across the quiet neighborhood street, marking the end of the bloodbath. For people, 3 innocent victims, and the killer, lay dead or dying in the driveway and on the lawn of the house on Huss Street. The scene went silent, broken only by the mother's profound grief and the horrified response of neighbors who had called the police. The first responding officers rushed to the scene around 6:25 p.m., responding to reports of gunshots and people screaming. What they found was a devastating crime scene. The officers entered the house and found the mother, physically uninjured but in a state of absolute, crippling shock. She was described as overwhelmed and visibly traumatized. Outside, the scene was grim. Ryan Eagon and the 7-month-old infant were quickly pronounced dead at the home. Both the 7-year-old boy and Dustin Willey were rushed to the hospital with critical injuries. Tragically, both later died. The simple, quiet move-out had turned into a quadruple homicide. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, please reach out to a professional resource. They know how to plan for the moments of highest risk. What state or country are you watching from? Let me know below so we can share local resources for anyone who needs them. The investigation began immediately. Tiffin police called in agents with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, BCI, to help process the complex scene. No shots were fired by the responding officers. The bloodshed was entirely the work of the killer, Ryan Eagon. Police Chief David Pauley spoke for the entire city when he described the event as a tragedy of horrific and heartbreaking nature. His words were a call for community support, not just for the surviving mother and the victims' families, but for the first responders who had to process the sight of 2 murdered children. The true crime here is the absolute cruelty of a man who decided that if he couldn't have his family, he would ensure they never had a life without him. The ambush was complete, and the cost was everything. When the gunfire stopped, the devastation became a cold, hard fact. The scene on Huss Street was no longer a quiet suburban street. It was a complex disaster zone. The calls poured into the Tiffin Police Department. Reports of multiple shots and screaming brought officers and Tiffin Fire and Rescue rushing to the scene. What they encountered was an unspeakable horror. Inside the house, officers located the surviving mother. She was physically unhurt, a miracle considering the violence, but her mind was reeling. The police confirmed she was in a state of absolute, crippling shock, overwhelmed and visibly traumatized. She had survived the ambush, but she was now faced with an unimaginable, lifelong burden of grief. Outside, the grim reality of the 4 victims was immediately apparent. Ryan Eagon and the 7-month-old infant were pronounced dead right there at the home. The 7-year-old child and Dustin Willey were both transported immediately to Tiffin Mercy Hospital. Despite the rapid response of emergency personnel, their wounds were fatal. They both died shortly after arriving. In a matter of minutes, a family of 4 was reduced to 1 survivor, surrounded by death and police tape. The Tiffin police knew immediately this was not a routine investigation. The sheer scale and brutality of the crime, especially the murder of 2 young children, required extensive resources. They immediately called in the experts, agents with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The Bureau of Criminal Investigation agents specialize in processing major crime scenes. They began the meticulous work of gathering evidence. They processed the multiple shell casings found in the driveway. They examined the location of each victim to piece together the sequence of the attack. They conducted interviews with witnesses, the neighbors who heard the cries and the gunshots. All the physical evidence pointed to the same horrifying conclusion. This was a deliberate murder-suicide ambush orchestrated by Ryan Eagon. No police officer had fired a weapon. The violence was contained entirely to the tragic actions of the husband and father, who refused to let his family leave him. The news rocked the small, close-knit community of Tiffin. Police Chief David Pauley issued a powerful, emotional statement, acknowledging the collective trauma. As a community, we are not accustomed to events of this horrific and heartbreaking nature in Tiffin. I ask that all residents keep the victims' families in their thoughts as they face unimaginable loss. I also ask that our community keep the responding officers, firefighters, dispatchers, emergency medical personnel, and all others involved in their thoughts as they continue to process the emotional toll of this tragedy. His statement highlighted not just the loss of the victims but the profound, lasting impact on everyone involved, including the police and emergency services who witnessed the result of this ultimate act of domestic violence. The entire city was left grappling with the question, how could ongoing domestic issues escalate so quickly, so brutally, and so fatally in their quiet town? The answer lies in the often unseen danger that exists when a relationship of control and fear finally breaks. The Tiffin ambush is a devastating tragedy, but within the heartbreak, there are essential, life-saving lessons. This case proves that leaving an abuser is the most dangerous moment and requires careful, professional planning. If you or someone you know is trying to leave an abusive situation, understand this fact. The moment of separation is the most likely time for violence and murder. The abuser loses all control, and that sense of powerlessness can trigger a violent response, often targeting the children to inflict maximum pain. The mother in this case made arrangements with her friend, but they were ambushed. This shows that relying on secrecy alone is often not enough. The critical step is professional safety planning. Do not go alone. Contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline or a local shelter. They have trained advocates who can create a formal, tailored safety plan. If you must return to the home to get belongings, ask law enforcement for a civil standby. This means police officers will be present to keep the peace and deter any violence. This is a crucial layer of safety that should never be skipped. Never disclose your new location, even temporarily, to anyone who might accidentally share it. The abuser should never be able to predict your movements. Viewers need to understand the markers for high-risk situations. If the abuser owns a gun, the risk of homicide skyrockets. Any threat of harming the family is a serious sign of lethal intent. An abuser who monitors movements, cuts off communication, or controls finances is building a dangerous level of resentment and control. This tragedy in Tiffin, Ohio, resulted from a breakdown of control, ending in the deaths of a supportive friend and two beautiful, innocent children. We share these stories not to just recount the horror, but to give you the tools to spot the warning signs and help save a life. Thank you for watching this difficult story. If you found the information in this video helpful, please subscribe to our channel for more true crime analysis and critical safety takeaways. If you are watching this and need help, there is hope and there are resources waiting to assist you. Please reach out. We need to work together to ensure no one has to face this level of violence alone.
If you enjoyed this true crime story from True Crime Lab Hub, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with fellow true crime enthusiasts. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so drop your comments below.